In this video, we're going to look at transformations of parent functions using a, h, and k. So we've got three functions over here on the right. Our red function is quadratic. We've got x squared. The green one, we've got absolute value of x, and the blue one, we've got the square root of x. So we're going to look at these three primarily, but any function we look at with transformations is going to be in the form of a times f of x minus h parentheses plus k. So with these three functions, we're looking at y equals a times the absolute value of x minus h plus k. We've got y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. And we've got our third one of y equals a times the square root of x minus h plus k. So those are the three that we're looking at. And with each of these, we've got our a value, which is going to change the parent graph in one way. We've got our h value inside the parentheses, and we've got the k value at the end of the parentheses or after the parentheses, which is going to do something. So let's look at a. So this is going to be some number, positive or negative, that is being multiplied before the function is doing something to x. So in this one, we're doing absolute value of x. Here we're taking the square root of x. Here we're squaring x. You could do cubed root. You could do rational equations. So really, f of x could be anything. But let's look at the a value. So if we look at our graphs over on the right, and we adjust this slider, so a starts at 1, but then if you notice, it's adjusting here. When it's positive and it gets bigger than 1, the graph is getting taller. So all of those points on the graph are stretching up. If we make it 1, there's our default graph, and then if we go negative, it flips upside down. And then notice here, when we start at 1 and we drop between 0 and 1, it's flattening. So if we got all the way down to 0, everything would just turn into a horizontal straight line. But when it's a decimal or a fraction between 0 and 1, it's flatter than the default. So a stretches or compresses or shrinks the graph vertically by a factor of a. So that's the first transformation here. And then notice when it was negative, it also flipped it upside down. So when it's negative, it also reflects the graph vertically in the x-axis. So when it's the default 1, then the graph is your normal shape. When it's greater than 1, it's going to stretch it vertically. When it's less than 1 but greater than 0, it's going to shrink it or compress it. It flattens the graph. And then when it's negative, it flips that graph upside down. Next, we have h. So h is the tricky one. That's the one that confuses people because it's x minus h in the parentheses. So if you have an h value of 3, that's going to shift the graph left or right, but it's the opposite of the sign in here. So if we have x minus 3, the h value is actually positive 3, which is why it's going to shift it to the right. So if we notice over here, when we add a positive h value, it's shifting everything to the right. Now, in the equation, that would look like x minus 3, or x minus absolute value of x minus 3, or the square root of x minus 3. So a positive h value creates a negative inside the parentheses, which shifts the graph to the right. If we put a negative h value, so let's say we have -1 or -2, notice that it's shifting the graph to the left. So if we plug, let's say, -4 in, -4 would be x minus -4, which becomes x plus 4. So that's why when you have a plus inside the parentheses or underneath the radical or inside the absolute value, it's actually moving the graph to the left because your h value is negative. So h will shift the graph left or right the opposite direction of the sign inside the parentheses. Or in the case of square root, underneath the radical, or absolute value inside the absolute value. So h shifts the graph left or right, and it's going to be the opposite direction of the sign we see in our equation or in the function. Now k, if we look here, is after the parentheses. So after you take the square root, or after you take the absolute value, or after you square it, or after you take cube root or cube it, or whatever function you're looking at, k is after that. And if we look at our graphs over here on the right, it's going to shift up and down. So if you have a positive k value of +5, if you're adding 5 at the end, it's going to shift everything up 5. If you have a -6, it's going to shift everything down 6. So k will shift that graph up and down the same direction as the sign. So it's going to shift that graph up or down vertically based on the sign, whether you're adding or subtracting. So those are basic transformations of a, h, and k. A stretches or shrinks. It can reflect it in the x-axis. H is going to shift it left or right, the opposite direction of what is in your parentheses or absolute value or square root. And then k is going to shift it up or down the same direction as that sign. So I hope that helps. Hopefully that clears some things up. It works for any function, and a, h, and k will be the same for any type of equation we're working with. So if you like that, if it helps, subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to the next video.